But first, the first thing we did want to do is kind of just go over the current situation we're in. So Jamie and me can give you a bit of an overview of everything that's been going on for us at work, both like from a personal standpoint as well as Key overall. But before we did that, we wanted to kind of hear from you all about how this situation has been impacting you, how you've been adjusting to not being on campus, doing the virtual learning and whatnot. So if you guys just want to, anyone who wants to chime in, just kind of let us know like how it's been going for you.
Like, are you guys enjoying being at home or enjoying sleeping in extra time?
I mean, for me personally, I think it's really messed up, like, my routine. I had like a very strict schedule to be on, but 2 of my jobs have closed because of COVID. So I have a lot of extra free time, but I don't really know I'm very bored.
Yeah. So what are they doing with the GAs right now?
So we all get to work from home. That's my only job that I have that's still going. So we do get to work from home, which is really nice. But it's definitely a change not having to deal with like commuting and like doing like all of the extra club events, because a lot of those have been canceled, and then a lot less work to be managed as well.
Okay. Wow. I mean, I know it's definitely has its pros and cons, especially for a lot of people. So it's just interesting to get some feedback about how everyone else is coping with it. Does anyone else want to share their experience?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll share. I worked at Sherwin-Williams, and I was also obviously going to school. So working from home, I used to just have so many things to do, and I don't know, everything just turned out to be so much slower. Only having one screen at home kind of was rough, and just kind of slow everything down, just from sending an email to just doing something that usually would take me 30 seconds took me a few minutes now. So everything was just slower, and at first it was nice, but now it's kind of just like, oh, I'm kind of just done with this. So I don't know. And like Kayla said, it's tough to manage everything that you had previously done through a routine. Now it's just kind of like, oh, like what am I supposed to do now? Like, guys, it's just figuring everything out and getting everything done in a timely fashion, I guess.
Yeah.
How's the transition been for the virtual learning? Like, have your classes changed at all? Do you think your professors have been able to adapt?
Yeah, I mean, some of my professors have switched to like video, like PowerPoint lessons, and some of them just, assign different articles to read and just write about those, but it's kind of been different for every class.
Did any of you live on campus and have to move out, or how did they handle that with the like dorms and whatnot? Or was everyone commuting?
Yeah, I don't think that anybody in the chat that I recognized was living on campus.
Okay.
We do have a message in the chat. Aaron says that the situation has been great for his studies, but he feels like as soon as the semester's done, he's going to hate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. It's going to be tough too. You go through this and you make all these adjustments, and then, I guess, we don't know at what point things will get back to normal, but then you're going to have to adjust back to more of like a regular routine. So I can definitely see that. Well, now we can kind of share what's been going on with us, being in this, situation and working and all that we have going on. So Jamie, do you kind of want to start with how, you've been adapting?
Yeah. So I'm in the rotational program. So just to let you know, I graduated in 2018 of December, but the summer of 2018, I interned at KeyBank, and then I joined the rotational program July of 2019. So I'm in my 3rd rotation right now. I plan on going through all 4, and I'm currently in tax. So very first day that we started the quarantine was supposed to be my first day in tax, and it was. I still continued my rotation, but it was fully remote. So I was working in a team that is usually used to being in the office every day, except for Fridays, and that just seems to be the culture of that specific team within finance. And it was a little tough because the entire team was adapting to working from home, and that was a big adjustment for them to do that 5 days a week versus one. So having a new person on the team, I think, was a really big challenge for them, because they weren't used to maybe sharing their screen as often or training someone who doesn't really specialize in taxes, trying to teach them federal income tax. So it was a little bit of a challenge. And yeah, they've been working really well around that. And I think they've done a really great job since then with getting me up to speed. So just to kind of give you a background of where I am as far as professionally at KeyBank, and KeyBank, what they've really done with their employees so far, they have 11,000 employees working from home. They've even increased their premium pay for people who are working in branches because they're at the front lines and they are having to go in there still. KeyBank has shut down some of their branches and closed their lobbies unless it's a scheduled meeting. But, for the most part, some people do still have to go to work. They have 11,000 employees working from home. So the people in the branches are getting compensated premium pay. And then we have an extra 15 days it's a code for COVID. So basically it doesn't eat into our PTO. So if we have anyone who actually gets sick or has childcare, if they have to work from home or work in the office, but they have to take care of their kids, it's extra days that they can use. So I think that's been really flexible of them. And there was actually one other, they're also paying their employees $1,000 if they are considered essential employees. And that's for daycare. So it's something that helps out. So I found that, while all of you are looking for employment afterwards, I think it's really important to look at what companies have been doing during this time and how they've been treating their employees.
Yeah, so I'll kind of give you guys an idea of what I've been doing as well. So similar to Jamie's in a rotational program right now, she's supposed to start a new role with all this going on. So somewhat similar to her. So I had been in SEC reporting for 3 years in the accounting department. So primarily responsible for preparing Key's quarterly earnings release, 10Q, 10K at the end of the year. So about a month before all this started, I moved to a new role in FP&A, which is part of the finance department. And then we all got sent home. So it's been, an interesting transition for me as well, to kind of go from being able to stop in somebody's office or walk over their cube to ask questions to being fully remote. So, definitely some, difficulty at times doing that, but I think at this point most people are kind of used to this environment. So everyone's doing their best to adjust and adapt. So I did want to also talk about some of how this has disrupted some of Key's business. So Jamie mentioned a number of employees we have working from home, and some of the branch closures. But Key also has had to make some changes, and you'll see a lot of these are kind of like industry wide as far as things like temporarily suspending share repurchase programs. So if you think back to the prior financial crisis, so banks were at that point more of a cause of the issue, right? So a lot of different regulations were put in place to make sure that banks were, staying well capitalized, meaning that, the banks have liquid assets. So that way, if there was some sort of downturn, banks would still be able to lend and assist customers. So to help ensure that would continue, some banks were announcing plans to suspend their stock repurchase program. So Key followed suit in that. One of the big tools that the Fed had to try to help alleviate some of the issues with the COVID crisis was taking the prime lending rate, the target prime lending rate, all the way down to 1 2/4%. So banks kind of follow suit then, and then you will lower their own lending rate to customers. So we had to do that. At the same time, our CEO is also transitioning. So our CEO, Beth Mooney, is retiring on May 1st. So there's been a lot going on internally at the company. Now that has been a smooth transition because it was planned and announced, and everything has been working well, but still just, change of leadership going on here. And then Key has also had to make or has announced some support, different support initiatives for customers, payment deferrals, working to restructure loans, trying to help all of our clients get through this. One of the big things that we have going on, I don't know how much you all have been paying attention to the federal government response to it, but there is something called the Paycheck Protection Program. So that was part of the I guess probably like the second or third round of stimulus funding, and it was designed to help get money into the hands of small businesses to keep people on their payrolls. So Key has always been one of the larger small business lenders, usually in like the top 10 or so, for loans through the Small Business Administration each year. So we already had some capability of doing this, but we saw this crucial to our clients. So Key was very proactive in contacting clients, finding out who needed assistance, and then helping them apply for these loans. So through the first round here of the funding, we had, sorry, this is on my screen here. Sorry, this is locking up on me. Well, I don't know why that's not working, but I think my screen says that we had taken 38,000 applications. And we were able to, you might see some things publicly disclosed as well. $7.8 billion of loans are going to be funded through us. So in comparison to some of the other large banks, we were able to do like an outsized effort on this. It took a lot of work. We pulled in people who were not primarily responsible for this, had people kind of switch roles so that they could help support this program. One of the big things for Key is being part of the community. So this was a way to help make that happen for our small business customers. And we've also announced some charitable contributions along with this. And one other thing that's kind of cool that we're doing that you might do on social media, and the hashtag KeyBank Assist. So Key has been trying to help local restaurants and first responders and customers out there. So we've been partnering with athletes and some of the teams that we have affiliations with, so some of the sports teams, doing things like, going to small businesses or going to small business restaurants, buying gift cards, distributing those to first responders, people on the front lines. So trying to have, kind of like a double impact there, helping support some small businesses as well as all of the first responders. Does anyone have any questions on kind of like how COVID has impacted our business or anything that we just talked through?
I actually have a question for Jamie.
Yeah.
So I know some of our members have had their internships for the summer already moved entirely online. So do you have any advice maybe for like working with a completely new team remotely, like for some of our members who are going to be dealing with that?
Yeah, actually, so I'm glad you brought that up because it was something I was going to definitely, give advice on. So what I really love about Key, they have basically a culture of, okay, let's have a one-on-one. So it's a coffee culture, I want to call it. And if you talk to someone at Key in person, you say, hey, can I meet with you for coffee? Reach out to them in email, introduce yourself. No one is really going to say no. It's just kind of something that is a culture at Key. It's about a half hour. You meet for coffee. You can talk to them, get to know them, build rapport. So I've kept that going, and I really use that while I was remote in tax right now, and I've gotten to meet every single person on my team, and tax has one of the largest teams within finance. So I've taken that, I took that initiative, and I was able to build a rapport with everyone, and then I was able to get more work and then reach out to people through Dapper, which is our online messaging internally at KeyBank. And I was able to collaborate with people easier. And, then it wasn't like I was just reaching out to them and we had never met before. So I did that in the first 2 weeks. I made that my priority. So I would definitely recommend doing that. And you can get a list from your program manager in that department and ask them who's on the team. So look for an org chart, just ask for it. They'll most likely give it to you. And then you can start reaching out to them in email, introduce yourself, ask if you can set something up on the calendar, like what week might be best, and then try to schedule that within the first 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, if there's no other questions, the only other thing that I would kind of add here is I would encourage you all to, there's kind of a balance, right? You don't want to be reading news all the time because it's not, there's a lot of kind of sad stuff out there at this point. But I would encourage you to pay attention to how this is impacting the economy, through the responses from businesses, from large corporations to small businesses, as well as the government's response to it. So looking back, once all this kind of started happening, working at a bank, a lot of people started asking questions about like, how does this compare to the financial crisis? And like I said earlier, the financial crisis in 2008, 2009 was different really for our business, because at that point banks were part of the problem, and now we are working to be part of the solution to help support clients and businesses get through this. So in 2008, I was a freshman in college, and I don't think I really paid attention to a whole lot of anything that was going on. It was kind of like something I knew was going on in the background, but I wasn't really like staying informed, like how it was gonna change things for me, or how it would change businesses and whatnot. So I would encourage you all to do the opposite and to stay up to date on this, because it's a good learning experience. I know that this is, for Jamie and me, being relatively early in our careers, something that we'll never forget. And there's definitely going to be things that change about the way we work and that come out of this. But I think, even if you aren't in a professional role yet, it's still good to, stay up to date on everything. So that way you can try to learn from this going forward. All right, so next up, we wanted to talk about what was really kind of like the main topic of our presentation here, which is going through, soft skills, how you could end up using them in an internship or, your first job out of college, kind of the importance of them, and then what Jamie and me will walk through, some examples of ways that we use these in our own experiences. So when you guys think about soft skills, is that something you ever like practice or like kind of think about or think that's important? Quiet group today. Should start calling on people because I can actually see your names.
Yeah, I would.
No one? Oh, okay, we got one.
Okay. I would say that for myself, I know that like when I'm in the midst of school and the heck of it, you're so dedicated to learning about like the hard skills and like the technicalities of accounting and all of that. But when I'm maybe more in my social life and maybe more in the summer when I'm in like places of work, I tend to find myself focusing more on my soft skills. So I would say it often depends as a college student on the time of life that you're in, it seems like. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of people defocus, while you're in school. Obviously, you're thinking about the hard skills, preparing for classes and exams and whatnot. But it is good to kind of keep soft skills in mind. The way I like to think of it is, anything you do kind of while you're in school, whether it be, interacting with, classmates or instructors or, in student groups you might be involved in. And even as you get into like an internship, kind of think of it as practice. So especially for people who are more like introverted, it can be, if it doesn't come naturally, I like to think of that's just like practice time, right? So you can try to, find ways to kind of come out of your shell and whatnot to work on your communication skills, getting used to working in a team. You know, it's a great opportunity to try to like see, you know, what does work for you. So what we can do here is kind of go through, Jamie and me, you know, like have some examples that we can talk through of ways that we've used some of the skills that are on the screen here. And these are really things that we just kind of like picked out of the kind of examples. There's a whole lot that goes into what people talk about soft skills. But Jamie, do you want to just pick one and give an example how you used it in your internship?
Yeah. So with work ethic, I think this is something where, you know, we all understand what is good work ethic, you know, as far as if you're visible and you can see that, you know, you're consistent with your hours. If you say you're going to be there at 8, you know, you're there at 8, you know, work your full day. Don't take too long of a lunch. So something I've noticed with the transition with working remotely, I've created, and I actually had this even when I was in, you know, going into the office, but I have a project management sheet. It's just an Excel doc. And I'm basically, whenever I get assigned a project, I put in the title of the project. It can even be small projects. But that way I'm just tracking everything I'm doing. And it has a little progress bar. So it shows where I am. Am I 50% done, 75%, 100% complete? It says the person who assigned me the project and then a little description. And I think that's really important, especially if you're scheduling one-on-ones with you know, your managers, so that way they can see how productive you are. So that might really show good work ethic, especially while you're remote, and you can use that anywhere. So for me, that's been really helpful. What about you, Will?
So I'll give a good example for problem-solving skills. So I think when you're going through like an internship, it's important to kind of balance, you know, if you don't understand something, you want to feel comfortable asking a question about it. But if you don't want to just, you know, ask a question like right off the bat every time, you want to be able to kind of show initiative and that you can work through a problem and try to, you know, figure it out on your own. So when I first rotated over to the accounting department and was in SEC reporting, we do a lot with a program that's similar to Excel, and for me at first it was challenging to figure out, okay, like where did we source this number from, where did we get it? So just doing things even as simple as like knowing how to like trace a formula back in Excel really helped me kind of figure out where it was coming from, and then being able to look at the way something was done in the past to kind of walk through, see if you can find like prior period documentation or anything like that, is a good tool to be able to think of like, okay, where else could I find this before I ask a question? If you get to the point where you can't move forward and you have to ask, that's totally fine. But that was something that I did to help get to the point where if I did need to ask a question, it was more of like a final thing, like, hey, this is how I did it. I think, you know, if I had to ask like guidance on the, you know, to get over the last hurdle or anything. But I think my manager really appreciated that I was taking time to try to solve it on my own first. Jamie, do you have another one you want to share?
Yeah, and then one I wanted to bring up communication skills. I think, you know, just nonverbal communication is really important, and I think it gets overlooked a lot of times. So, you know, if you're on your phone while someone's talking to you, or if you're on Jabber and messaging someone while someone comes up to your cubicle, and, you know, if we do get to that point where we're back in the office, but just that nonverbal communication, or just showing, you know, sitting up straight in a meeting, you know, I just think it really goes far, and it shows people how interested you are in the work that you're performing. So I think that is something that gets overlooked. So I just wanted to bring that one up. And then even with communication skills, with making sure that you know when it's appropriate to send an email versus a message through Jabber, internal communication with someone. I think it's just everyone has a different preference, and I think it's good to read that and know your audience. Is there another one you wanted to point out, Will, or do you want to piggyback off of that?
Yeah, I guess the other one that I would kind of want to talk about here is leadership. So when you're first coming into a new role, you know, whether it be like first job out of college or an internship, I think that some people think like, hey, how can I really be a leader? Because you're not. And can you guys still hear me? My screen went blank here.
Yeah, I just see it as black.
Okay. All right. Well, if you can, as long as you can hear me, I'll keep talking. So, with leadership, I think it's important to think not just that, like, if you're in a formal leadership role of, training others, having people work underneath you, but also kind of being like a self-starter and leading yourself, being able to stay organized with projects. Things like that are kind of like how you start building some of the trust that you could be a leader in a group or department. So there's also kind of like the levels of leadership, right? So, you can think of a leader as someone like higher up, like a manager of a department or manager of a team. But there's also some of those like lower level roles that you can help take on to start demonstrating leadership. So I'll even use Jamie as an example. So something like this where, we need to go out and do campus recruiting. So Jamie, stepped up. So she's, been in the analyst program for just a couple months in the fall when we started doing our fall campus visits. And Jamie stepped up and, volunteered to go back to Cleveland State to help with some of our recruiting efforts. So something that you might not think as like a traditional, leadership role, but really helpful to demonstrate, like now that we know, okay, like Jamie's capable of doing this, she wants to be involved. It kind of sends the message to people that you wants to be a leader and are capable of it going forward. Some of the other ones that we had up there at one point, I think we had
Flexibility,
interpersonal skill. Yeah, flexibility. That's a good one. If you do have an internship this summer and you're in a situation where you have been moved fully remotely, you're going to have to be flexible. Something that you're probably getting used to right now with classes and whatnot. But a good opportunity to kind of learn on the fly, but being able to demonstrate, to the company that you're working with, that you're able to work in a non-traditional manner, a good way to help, demonstrate that you have some of those skills. I am going to try to get my screen back here.
Yeah, and I think we hit all of the skills.
Okay.
And I think there's just one more. Sorry, did you hit on teamwork, Will?
I did not, no.
That was one other. So while you're getting the screen going, I can elaborate on that. So, I mean, there are a lot of team activities, even in the internship program or FA program. So something you can think of where you're going to work with your peers, or even when you're, collaborating with your, group. So finance at KeyBank, because that's what Will and I are currently, the finance department. We are a support group, so sometimes you will be working with other lines of businesses outside of finance to help them. So it's just nice to have that team mentality with communication and just kind of like trying to be flexible and meet a common goal. So I think that's something that's really important in any work environment. But does anyone have any questions so far, or want to add to, something, any of those?
I have a question actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm Matt. I'm a first year accounting student at Case. My question is, how would you recommend developing soft skills in kind of like this current environment, especially since we're not around a lot of other students, or, companies aren't doing a lot of visits anymore? So like, how would you recommend like networking and building those skills?
Yeah.
So I can.
Yeah, I think that's a great question because it is a really unique environment. Oh yeah, go for it.
Well, I think the first thing that I would say is like you're doing the right thing by participating in something like this, where, this is obviously different than if we were like having an in-person meeting, but just kind of showing up to something like this and getting practice, because you do have like an internship that you end up being remote. A lot of companies might have you like doing things like virtual meetings and calling in and whatnot. So it's definitely a challenge, right? So, you can't go to like a networking event or anything like that right now. But even something like this is taking a good step.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Jamie, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Oh yeah, and I was just going to say, like trying to meet with people through email and then scheduling video calls if you can. I think that's just really important, just trying to stay connected with people within, like, say, BAP Alpha Psi or other groups. I think those will definitely help you adapt and kind of sharpen those soft skills.
Yeah, and with if you do have if you are going to be doing calls and whatnot, and they want you to have like a camera on, each companies and departments might be different, but if you I would make sure that you're dressed professionally, like kind of like think about like being at work, how you would dress, how you would act. So that would be it's something that I would add on there.
Hey, Will. Hey, Jamie. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm just going to follow up on Matt's question. I'm also a first year from Case Western. I'm Darren Wang. I just wanted to ask, so in regards to kind of all this virtual reality, I've been reading like articles where everyone's kind of getting Zoom fatigue and kind of getting tired of like hearing coronavirus and being in this situation. Do you guys experience this on your end, and kind of like what are some strategies to overcome this and like kind of ease it?
Yeah, so as far as like the Zoom fatigue factor, I will say that when this first started, a lot of people, at least in some of the finance departments at Key, some of the finance teams, really wanted us to be on like cameras and all that, and that did not last very long. I think people got kind of like burned out on it quickly. Plus, we would have like connection issues when you would have like too many people called on. To your point about like having getting fatigued of just like hearing about coronavirus all the time, whatnot. Yeah, I would say that overall is like an issue, not only just in the office, but also like personally, right? So for us at work, it has been kind of front and center because we have had to change, and we have like new products, and there's things that we are doing that are very specific to address the impact that it's having on our clients as well as like on the business. So it is somewhat hard to get away from on like a daily basis, or like in our professional work. But I will say that having like kind of like a scheduled break throughout the day, when you're at work, it might be easier because you might be going out for lunch or something like that. But what I found in this situation is making time each day to just to take a short break. So a little bit more about my own situation. So working from home, we have a 6-month-old son. So daycares are closed, right? So my mom comes over every day to watch him from 8 to 4. So, throughout the day, I'll just go up, a few different times just to, check in on them, see how they're doing. Gives me kind of like a forced break to like, look away, do something different for a few minutes. And then when my wife gets home from work, we usually go for a family walk with our dog, just to kind of like decompress before I log back on later. And trying to, not just read all of the negative news at this point. But it is tough. There's no doubt about it. Like you said, a lot of people are dealing with it. I think everyone is kind of, might have their own strategy of how they could cope with it. But I think it is important to find something that works for you.
Perfect. Thank you.
I guess a question going back more towards the soft skills and adaptability, is that, adaptability, is that something that kind of just comes over time as you experience different functions and different internships, or is, are there specific ways to develop that trait of adaptability?
Yeah, I think that really is something that just comes with experience. But I mean, if you think of it this way with adaptability, right? Like you have some friends that you might have a closer relationship with, or when you meet someone, you kind of can feel like, all right, like, you can just get a sense of what kind of person they're going to be, or like how, as far as like when it comes to relationships at work. So I know when I was in one department, I was working with a different group. It was smaller niche in my second rotation. And, they were just a very tight knit group. I mean, they were very welcoming, but I just knew that they were more like, I couldn't just approach them at their cube. It was more like, okay, they prefer Jabber first, and then I could walk over to their cube and then I could ask them my question. Some other people are going to prefer email, but that's something you'll just kind of understand while you're building that rapport with them. And, it might take the first few encounters, and some people will be a little more blunt about how they want to be approached, and some might just be a little nicer about it, right? Like some might just give you the heads up and say, hey, next time, just can you please not come over to my cube, and can you please just jabber me first? Sometimes they'll let you know and sometimes they won't. And that's just going to take some experience too.
Okay, thank you.
Another thing that I would add for adaptability, so if you're thinking about kind of like how you do your work, how you get it done, what tools you use, might not necessarily be something that like applies right away, like during like an internship or, you know, your first job, but being open to change is really important. So right now in the finance department at Key, we are going through a big overhaul of some of our systems, with having downstream impacts on kind of like how our teams are structured and set up. And it's when you're in a situation where there's going to change, it's really important to, you know, be open to going through that change and understanding, you know, why it's important for the function that you're working in. You know, if you push back, it's okay to push back if you think that something isn't going to work or you see an issue or a flaw. But just generally being open to change the way that you have to work is good, because it's, you know, it shows that you can work in more than one way. You don't want to be, you know, in a role where you're kind of like pigeonholed, so you don't want to like force yourself into that.
Am I allowed to add something on the topic of like adaptability and flexibility real quick?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So I've been at my internship for like 3 years now, and like the work environment that I have, there's a lot of like really fast changing priorities. Like sometimes you'll have like meetings scheduled for a day and people will be like, never mind, we have this like big thing that's coming up. You need to do this first. You need to work on this. Or like, hey, this just came up. Can you stay like 2 hours late today? Like I've had to cancel plans and stuff too. But I think like taking the initiative and just saying like, not being a yes man, obviously, but when somebody says like, hey, we have this thing that's changing and this thing that's coming up, if you take that step to say like, yeah, like I can like move back my dinner, yeah, I can come in early, yeah, like if you need me on a Saturday or doing the special thing that I've never done before, I've noticed that it's like appreciated a lot, and sometimes it'll allow your like bosses or your coworkers to be more flexible with you. Like if you need something or if your schedule is going to be changing, like when you're like adaptable and flexible, other people are a lot more willing to work with you, I think, when you need that on your end as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Kayla, because I think a lot of people see, you know, like work from home or how many PTO days they get right away. And it's about understanding, being adaptable and flexible to other people's schedules and knowing when is appropriate to take those days off. For instance, like we have quarter-end projects or month-end projects. And sometimes it's just not feasible for some people to take certain days off in the first week or the first 2 weeks, depending on the department. And it's just being able to adapt to that and understanding that your schedule might have to change. Does anyone else have anything to add to that, or even any other topics?
I have another question.
Well,
oh
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I had another question, but it's not really related to soft skills. So I was wondering, Will, what was kind of your experience getting into accounting, and like why did you choose to go into like a corporate role with Key? Because I've heard a lot about like banking roles at Key, but like I haven't heard too much about their accounting roles.
Yeah, for sure. So just to give you a little background, I started with Key as a part-time teller when I was in the Master of Accounting program at Cleveland State. So I was going to school full-time, working part-time. Through some of the recruiting efforts that Key had going on at Cleveland State, I learned about the risk review. So that's our internal audit function intern program. So that's actually kind of how I got into some more of the corporate functions. So I was in risk review for their internship program, and then what Key calls the analyst program. So that's where we hire a lot of students, right? You know, they're like first job out of college, where there's a training program, and then depending on the department, you spend a few months rotating through different groups. So when I started working at Key, I really liked the culture and the fit. You know, I really wanted to work in Cleveland, so I'm from the area, and it was important for me to stay here and to work for a company that has a good impact, not only from a corporate side but also on the community. So I really liked Key. The way I went through my program, so I did a couple of rotations through internal audit, and then I had the opportunity to move over to accounting. And I just found that I liked the work better in accounting. So the role that I placed into was an SEC reporting. So like I said, preparing things like the earnings release, the 10Q, the 10K. It really gave me a good kind of like high level view of how Key operates, where, kind of like putting together some of the financial statements, you learn a lot of the details of the bank. So I just really liked that aspect of it to kind of like start my career. So I was in that role for about 3 years before I, was kind of like ready for something new, which I would say is fairly common. Key is really supportive of people making lateral moves, whether it's between departments or just on a different team in the same department, to help you kind of like broaden your skill sets and see something different. So that's why I then moved into my role in FP&A recently. So I would say that there is, to your point, you've heard a lot about like banking roles, but I think sometimes the support functions get kind of overlooked in banking, because you're thinking like, oh, it's like everything is kind of finance, right? Like that's like what Key does is help finance companies. But the support role, so it's a different, type of work. As opposed to having like, if you're thinking about like an accounting role, if you're in like a public accounting role, your clients are other businesses, or if you worked in, investment banking or something like that at a bank, your clients are also, still external. So the support functions at Key, we still have clients, but they are just internal, other groups at the bank. So that's how I think we like to think about how we support the lines of businesses that we do internally. So it's kind of like a shift in what your client type is.
All right, thank you. And I was wondering, Jamie, are you in like a similar rotational program that Will was in?
Yeah, so I'm actually directly in the finance rotational program. When I interned at KeyBank, I was actually brought into the finance internship. And so I was already in the accounting role, and that's how I met Will. I actually went to meet the accountants night, and Will recruited me. So small role, but it worked out, and I really enjoyed accounting. To be honest, I just didn't want to go the Big Four route. I knew that right away, and I didn't really consider banking early on, just because banking, as we all know, in accounting, it really isn't taught in school, and it interested me, and I really liked the finance rotational program that they had in place. And because you kind of get a taste of 4 different departments within finance. So my first try with it was in the accounting group as an intern, and then I knew I wanted to be in the rotational program. So it just really worked out for me. So I've been in accounting for my internship, where I worked in SEC reporting slightly with Will. I got a small taste of it, accounting policy, accounting ops. And then my first rotation was in data analytics. My second rotation was consumer finance. So they were the support group for consumer banking. And now I'm currently in tax, and then I'll be going to investor relations next.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Will. I'm actually a risk review intern for this upcoming summer with KeyBank, so I'm looking forward to it. I was just wondering if you had any, things that you could offer to say for like soft skills that maybe I should emphasize during that internship, or just general points of emphasis during that time with KeyBank.
Yeah, so I would echo a lot of what Jamie has brought up earlier about communication and trying to reach out to people, to get to know people. So if you're in an internship, you don't really have, a few weeks really where you're trying to like make an impression on people. So being kind of going out of your way to introduce yourself, if you're in a situation where it is virtual, finding ways to still do that, setting up calls with people and whatnot. And then I would, this would be true for Key or anyone in other roles as well with different companies. Try to figure out how the current situation is impacting not only the business like overall, but also in your specific role. So if using Key as an example, so I talked about it's impacting the business because we're assisting with some of the small business administration loans. So trying to make an effort to learn what impact that has as on us operationally, the financial statements, the revenues and expenses associated with that, but then also down to your current role. So there might not be a direct impact. So depending on like if you're an internal audit, depending on which team of internal audit you're helping with, they might not be reviewing anything related to that. But just figuring out, okay, what role has internal audit played in this? What is internal audit paying attention to? Like, what are the risks that are associated with the situation? There would be like operational risks of having people remotely. There's the financial statement risk of making sure that we're recording everything properly, and then the controls that Key has put in place around those. So learning like what has Key done to mitigate those risks, and then is risk review doing anything to test those controls to make sure that they're functioning properly. So I think that's a good way to kind of demonstrate that you're understanding everything that's going on outside of the organization, and want to learn more about how it's like trickling down to everyone's role.
Steve, thank you.
Yep. Well, if there's no other questions, I can just real quick kind of go over. I tried to share my screen again and it crashed on me. So we'll just skip doing that. But we did have a slide in there to just talk about some of like the projects that you would work on if you were like an intern or an analyst in the finance department at Key. So the way we typically think about it is the internship program is something that most students come through while they're currently a student. And then the analyst program is where we hire a lot of students for kind of like that first job out of college role. So with both the intern and the analyst program, we usually have like some training, whether it be specific to your group or overall to learn more about banking. And then if you're an intern, you would get placed into a role for the summer. If you're in an analyst program, depending on the department, you would rotate around through a few different departments or through a few different groups. So specific to finance, after you come out of your training program, you rotate through 4 different groups within the finance department. The idea is to help get exposure to different functions and see how they help support the business and how they all kind of work together. So you could be doing anything from working in accounting to the tax department to treasury, finance role supporting a specific line of business, a corporate strategy role. So there's different ways that the finance department supports the business. So we want to make sure that people get a good flavor of all of that. When you're coming through the intern or analyst program, you might be working on things like creating reports about peers. How does Key stack up against peers in specific areas? How creating models of if we have this new there's a new pricing structure to how we lend. How is that going to impact specific lines of business? So any type of change we make, we have to kind of like model out. So we really like to have our interns and analysts kind of get into the work. The program is a good opportunity to for you to learn, but also for us to learn about you, figure out what skills you need to improve upon, so that way we can help kind of coach you up. Jamie, do you have anything you would want to add there?
Yeah, I mean, just within the programs, because I know that there might be some changes, but just working on those projects long term, or sorry, in the 7 weeks that you're there for the internship or in the analyst program, you will have some of those capstones and projects. For instance, my internship, I had a loan project, so I really had to in-depth understand loans, but I really used my resources that I made with the people who I built rapport with early on. And I utilized them to help me with that project because there was no way I could have understood what I was working on in full context without their help. So I was taking the initiative to set up meetings with them and just kind of building my network while I was there in the short period of time. So I think that's just really important, is just utilizing your other resources so that way you can try to, just fulfill some of your commitments. And you'll get a lot of exposure, with the assignments that you're given, and you'll have some opportunities to meet different people even outside of the departments that you're directly in.
All right. Does anyone else have any questions for us? No, well, hearing none, I would just say thanks for having us today. Jamie and me are both CSU alumni, so we're happy to be able to come back and talk to you all. And the few of you from Case, you guys are cool too. We appreciate you joining. But we we hope you guys are making it through this situation. Obviously, a change, not something that you would have anticipated, and it could throw off your college experience a little bit. But hope that you're finding ways to adapt and make it work. And good luck to you all as you go into the summer, whether you're taking class or working or doing a professional internship. Just really best of luck to you all.
Yeah, stay safe out there, guys.
Thanks you guys for taking the time to meet with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
For having us.
Thank you.